It is the summer of 1896, on the old iron pier at Coney Island, New York. A crowd is lining up to ride a strange new attraction, and they are paying to do it. It is a slanted belt of cast iron slats that carries them up a gentle incline, about 7 feet off the ground, and then sets them down. That is the whole ride. No loops, no drop, no speed. You just stand there and let the machine lift you. In 2 weeks, 75,000 people take that ride. They think it is a novelty, a carnival gimmick, a bit of fun on a summer afternoon. None of them realize they are standing on the machine that will quietly rewire how human crowds move through the world. An elevator moves people in batches. It fills, it rises, it empties, and everyone else waits. This slanted belt does something no elevator can. It never stops. It swallows an endless river of people and never makes a single one of them wait. That one difference is why the modern department store exists, why the subway can empty a packed platform in seconds, and why a shopping mall can pour thousands of bodies past storefronts without a bottleneck. Its name did not even exist yet. Someone had to invent a word for it. And that made-up word would become so common that the courts eventually ruled nobody was allowed to own it. To understand how a fairground toy became the machine that runs your city, you have to meet the man who built that Coney Island ride, because his story is a warning about who gets remembered and who gets erased. His name was Jesse Reno, and he was not some carnival tinkerer. He was a serious engineer, the son of a Union general who was killed leading men in the Civil War, a graduate of Lehigh University who had already built the first electric railway in the American South. This was a man who moved things for a living. And in 1892 he patented what he called an endless conveyor, a moving incline designed to carry human beings up a slope without them lifting a foot. There was just one problem. Nobody would fund it as transportation. The idea sounded absurd to serious men with money. Stairs that crawled on their own belonged in a circus, not inside a bank or a shop. An engineer proposing a self-moving staircase in 1892 sounded a little unhinged, so Reno did the only thing a rejected inventor could do. He took his serious machine and dressed it up as a toy. The Coney Island ride was the proof, and it was cleverer than it looked. Reno was not really in the entertainment business. He was running a live experiment on human psychology, and the question underneath it was enormous. Would ordinary people willingly step onto a surface that was already moving, and trust it not to hurt them? For all of human history, the instinct had been the opposite. A floor that moves is a floor that has failed. It means an earthquake, a collapsing deck, a trap. But 75,000 paying riders in 2 weeks answered the question for him. People would not merely tolerate a moving staircase. They would queue up and hand over money for the thrill of one. Reno had proven that the deepest obstacle to his invention was not mechanical at all. It was fear, and fear could be beaten. That single discovery, that humans could be trained to trust a moving floor, was worth more than any patent he held. And a very different kind of man was about to take it away from him. While Reno was thrilling crowds at Coney Island, another inventor named George Wheeler had quietly patented something closer to the machine we know today. Wheeler's design had flat steps that rose out of the floor and flattened out at the top, so a rider could step on and step off like an ordinary staircase. It was a better idea than Reno's cast iron belt, but Wheeler never built it at scale. His patent just sat there, a brilliant drawing waiting for someone with money and ambition to bring it to life. That someone was Charles Seeberger, and Seeberger understood something Reno and Wheeler did not. The invention was only half the battle. The other half was the name. In 1899, Seeberger bought Wheeler's step design patent. Then he did the thing that would echo for the next century. He needed a word for this machine, something that sounded modern and permanent, not like a circus ride. So he took the Latin word scala, meaning steps, and welded it onto the end of the word elevator. The result was a word that had never existed in any language before: escalator. He did not just coin it. In 1900, he registered it as a trademark, his private property, a made-up word he now legally owned. And to launch it, he needed a partner with reach. He found the biggest one on Earth. Seeberger partnered with the Otis Elevator Company, already the dominant name in vertical transport, the firm whose safety brake had made the passenger elevator possible in the first place. Together they built the first commercial step-type escalator and carried it across the Atlantic to the 1900 Paris Exposition, a World's Fair that ran for 7 months and drew more than 50 million visitors. There, in front of the entire industrialized world, the moving staircase won first prize. The novelty from a Coney Island pier now had a name, a powerful champion, and a trophy from Paris. What it still lacked was a purpose, a real job to do, and it found one in a place almost nobody would have guessed. Not a train station, a store. Here is where the escalator stops being a curiosity and starts quietly rewiring human behavior, and the change was so subtle almost nobody noticed it happening. Think about how a staircase works in a shop. It is a barrier. Climbing stairs takes effort and intention, so most shoppers simply never bother going up. Whatever a store put on its second floor was, in effect, invisible. The upper floors were dead space. The escalator erased that barrier completely. It carried shoppers upward with zero effort, gently and continuously, and it delivered them onto the higher floors without them ever deciding to make the climb. Suddenly, every floor was a ground floor. Every level was prime real estate. A design guide to shopping would later call it the single most important invention in the history of retail, and that is not an exaggeration, because the escalator did something no salesman could. It controlled where the crowd went. A store could now steer a river of customers past whatever it wanted them to see. The trick was in the placement. Escalators were deliberately arranged so that a shopper riding up to the third floor could not go straight there. To reach the next escalator, they had to step off, walk across the floor, past the displays, past the perfume, past the things they never planned to buy, and only then find the way up. The machine turned an entire building into one long, winding path of temptation, with no exits and no shortcuts. This is the exact reason a department store feels the way it feels. It is why you can walk in for a single pair of socks and walk out 40 minutes later, 3 floors higher than you meant to go, holding things you never knew you wanted. That is not an accident of architecture. It was engineered floor by floor by a machine that started life lifting thrill seekers 7 feet into the air at Coney Island. But before any of that could happen, the escalator had to conquer one last enemy, and it was the hardest one of all: fear. Because for all its brilliance, the escalator asked people to do something that went against a deep animal instinct. It asked them to step, willingly, onto a machine that was already moving, that could catch a shoelace, or a hem, or a fingertip, that never stopped and never waited. In America, the carnival framing had softened people up, but across the ocean, the fear was very real, and it nearly stopped the machine cold. In October 1911, the London Underground installed its first escalators at Earl's Court Station, built by Otis. Londoners did not see a marvel. They saw a clattering wooden monster that dragged you into an abyss. The terror was genuine, and it was not irrational. These early machines were clattering contraptions of wooden treads, and Londoners had questions no one had good answers to. Would a skirt get caught? Would a child be dragged under? Could the whole thing collapse? A government report on that first week at Earl's Court recorded the toll plainly: 9 dresses torn, 1 finger pinched, and 1 passenger fallen from their crutches. One woman wrote to a newspaper in 1912 that she could not bear the sensation of standing on a platform sliding downward into an abyss-like space, and that the first time she tried it, out of pure curiosity, she was left upset for the rest of the day. People froze at the top. They refused to step on. A machine built to move a crowd is worthless if the crowd is too frightened to touch it. The escalator did not have an engineering problem in London. It had a trust problem, exactly the one Reno had solved with a carnival in America 15 years earlier. So the railway, according to one of the most enduring legends in transit history, hired a man to solve the problem with his own body. His name was William Harris, known as Bumper Harris, and he had a wooden leg. The story goes that the Underground paid him to ride the Earl's Court escalators up and down all day long in full view of the nervous crowds. The logic was brutal and simple. If a one-legged man could ride this thing safely, over and over, without being swallowed by it, then surely an able-bodied Londoner had nothing to fear. Historians argue about whether the tale is entirely true, and there is a small model of him in a London museum to this day. But the fact that the story survives at all tells you how deep that fear ran, and how much work it took to overcome it. And there is a strange, permanent scar left over from those first frightened days, one you probably obeyed this week without knowing why. Those earliest London escalators had an odd feature. At the top, a diagonal partition shunted riders off to the left, physically shoving them off the moving steps and onto solid ground. Because the exit was on the left, anyone who wanted to walk up rather than stand had to keep to the right, so they would not crash into the people being funneled off to the side. That single quirk of a machine from 1911 is the origin of the stand on the right, walk on the left rule that millions of commuters still follow every single day, more than a century later, on escalators that no longer shunt anyone anywhere. But while the machine was conquering the world, its inventors were being quietly written out of their own story. Follow the money, because it tells you who really won. Jesse Reno, the man who first proved humans would trust a moving staircase, eventually sold his patents to Otis. Charles Seeberger, the man who bought the better design and gave the machine its name, sold his patent rights to Otis in 1910. One by one, the individual inventors cashed out and vanished from the story, and the Otis Elevator Company absorbed all of it: the cleat design, the step design, the trademark, the whole future of the machine. The men who imagined it faded into footnotes. The corporation that bought their ideas became a global giant, and Otis now owned that magic word, that made-up trademark, Escalator. It was, for decades, one of the most valuable brand names on Earth. Then, that very success detonated in the company's hands. Here is the trap, and it is one of the strangest fates that can befall a company. Otis marketed the word escalator so aggressively, and the machine spread so completely into department stores and subways and airports around the globe that ordinary people simply forgot it was ever a brand at all. They stopped thinking of it as an Otis product. They started using the word for any moving staircase, no matter who built it, the same way they said elevator for any lift. The name had become too famous to survive. A rival called the Houghton Elevator Company saw the opening and moved in for the kill. Houghton wanted to build moving staircases and call them escalators too, so it petitioned the United States Patent Office to cancel the trademark, arguing the word had become generic, a plain English noun that belonged to everyone, and the evidence was damning. It turned out Otis itself, in its own patents and advertising, had used the word escalator as a common term, spelled in small letters, right alongside the ordinary word elevator. The company had been so successful at making its brand a household word that it had accidentally proven the word was no longer a brand. In 1950, in a case called Houghton Elevator Company versus Seeberger, the Patent Office ruled against Otis. The trademark was canceled. The made-up word Charles Seeberger had invented, welded together out of Latin and legally claimed as his own, was stripped from the company and handed, for free, to the entire human race. There is a name for this fate. Lawyers call it genericide, a brand so wildly successful that it kills its own trademark by becoming the everyday word for the thing itself. Escalator sits in that strange graveyard alongside aspirin, cellophane, and zipper, names that were once private property and are now just words. Otis had won so completely that it lost. It had made its brand into the definition of the product, and in doing so it had made the brand worthless. Every competitor on Earth was now free to stamp the word escalator on machines Otis had spent half a century perfecting. And so the machine, born as a 7-foot carnival ride at Coney Island in 1896, quietly became one of the most consequential objects ever built. It never got the fame of the automobile or the airplane. Nobody writes songs about it. Most people cannot name a single person who invented it. But look closely, and you will see it moves more human beings, every single day, than every airline and passenger railway on the planet combined. An invisible machine carrying billions of us through the crowded arteries of the modern world. Jesse Reno proved we would trust it. George Wheeler shaped its steps. Charles Seeberger gave it a name so powerful, the law eventually took that name away and gave it to everyone. 3 men, 1 machine, and a word that outgrew its own owners. The next time one of them catches you at the bottom and lifts you up without a single thought passing through your head, remember what it actually is. Not a staircase, a machine that taught an entire species to trust a moving floor, and then quietly assembled the crowded, flowing world we all live inside, without ever asking for the credit.